You're listening to international investment advisor Doug Goldstein on the Goldstein On Gelt Show, the financial show where we'll talk about how you can make the most of your money. With all the confusing financial chatter bombarding you each and every day, Goldstein On Gelt will give you the practical information you want and need about living a financially stable life. Here's your host, money maven Doug Goldstein.
Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to bring back to the show Professor Walter Williams from George Mason University. He wrote a number of books. His most recent one is called Race and Economics, How Much Can Be Blamed on Discrimination. And last time he spoke with us a great deal about discrimination issues and some of the problems with affirmative action and with minimum wage and with certain regulations that happen in the government. And today, Professor, I'd like to talk a little bit on over the ocean to talk perhaps about how this might apply to people in Israel. So first of all, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
One of the questions that comes up a lot, and sometimes people just take it as a joke, but I think it's a good question, is that if it's proper for African Americans to demand reparations for slavery, would it also be proper for, let's say, Jews to demand the same from Egypt or the English and Spanish from the Romans and the Muslims?
Well, you know, so far as blacks demanding reparations for slavery, there's by no stretch of the imagination was slavery just. It was unjust. And so if I had it my way, I would require that reparations be made by slave owners to black slaves. But however, both of those parties are dead now, so that's a matter that's going to have to be taken over in heaven or hell or wherever they are. But the point here, it was with reparations, that is, if I, Walter Williams, would receive reparations, well, it's not going to come from the Tooth Fairy, so you're not going to come from Santa Claus, so what you have to do, you'd have to take money from a white person of today to punish him for what a white person of yesterday did to a black of yesterday. And that, to me, is a weird sense of social justice. That is the fact of business is that the people who committed some of the injustice, you might make a case, well, they're duty bound to make up for it, but if they're dead, well, what can you do?
Okay, now I'm going to ask you a perhaps not politically correct question, but I've been out of America now for about 20 years, so you'll help me out. I always understood that the term African American is the current proper term, and you're using the term black. Is there a reason that you and I are not on the same page? What don't I understand?
Well, I mean, you wouldn't call a Jewish person from Germany a European American. I mean, that's too broad an area. That is, if you look at an Egyptian who comes to United States, well, Egypt is in Africa, and so would he be an African American? I think he would be. Or you take an Afrikaner from South Africa who resides in America, would you call him an African American?
Yeah, in fact, I had a friend who applied to college. They wrote on the application, they had to say what his race was. And he said, I'm an African American, and he was a white Jewish fellow from South Africa. So.
That is absolutely right. So now if you wanted to make sense, you say, well, look, Walter Williams is a Nigerian American or a Ghana American, but we don't know where we came from. What country? So to call I think Africa is a continent. It's not a country. And to say that call a Frenchman a European and a German a European. Well, yeah, technically on the right continent, but those people hate each other. They've been fighting each other for centuries. So anyway, see, and then also I'm 75 years old. So I've lived through a number of names for my people. That is, at first, among the more flattering ones was colored, Negro, Afro-American, black, and now they want me to change again to African-American. I'm just saying, look, I'm too old to change.
I hear. So it's the current, is this just your take on it, or is someone living in Israel who's referring to people in America as black and white, it's okay to refer to blacks?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say so. Yes, and and it's typically used on the news. Every once in a while, someone wants to make an extra effort to be politically correct, and they'll say African American.
Okay. So a lot of the research that you've done has been related to the importance of not enforcing some kind of minimum wage or having regulations that would, the last time we spoke when you were on the show, you spoke about not having licensing requirements for taxi cabs because the example you gave was that in New York it could cost over $600,000 to get a taxi medallion, and a black person couldn't necessarily afford that and therefore couldn't own his own business. So,
well, a polka dot person who did not have the money couldn't get in business either.
Okay. Sorry. So here in Israel we have the two particular groups that are often considered as amongst the poorest and with the least opportunities are the ultra-religious Jews, the Haredim, and the Arab Israeli population. They tend to have very, very large families, not great education in terms of work education, and there's a big discussion about whether Israel should have a minimum wage just to get these people into the flow earning money. Do you think that the principles you've studied would apply here as well?
Well, yes, it would. It's like the law of gravity. That is, the law of gravity is the same in Israel as it is in the United States. And same thing with the law of demand. That is, the higher the price of something, the less people will take of it, including labor. The lower the price, more people will take of it. And so the minimum wage law has the same effect no matter where it is applied. That is, it tends to discriminate against the employment of low-skilled people. And matter of fact, it also handicaps entrepreneurs. And one way that entrepreneurs get around, small shops, get around a number of government regulations, including the minimum wage, is to hire the family, for it to become a family business. And if it's a family business, you don't have to pay minimum wages.
I see. There's always it's a real problem. As a small businessman, my day job is that I have an investment company, and recently the government required that every single company in Israel has to give a retirement package to its employees. So I was talking to a friend of mine who owns a cafe around the corner, and he said that he used to have a fellow who would come for an hour or two a week to mop up and clean up, and he said, I have to give this guy a pension plan. I said, I fired him. What was I going to do? It was too much. Just the paperwork would cost me more. So
That's right. And so there's a guy. Nobody's made better off by that.
Right. Well, maybe the insurance agents who manage these plans, but I'll come to that later. One of the issues that a lot of people in the States are talking about is the question of estate tax. They say there are families in America who are literally billionaires who've never paid tax on this money that they've made because for any of a number of reasons. And they push that it's moral to charge them a larger either income tax or asset tax or estate tax in order to help those people who don't have. Do you think that is, in fact, a moral solution?
No, it's not, and it's a very, very foolish solution. And that is, I think that the estate tax is one of the more vicious taxes around. That is, what it does for many people to pay the estate tax. They own a small business, or their parents own a small business, their parents die, and sometimes they have to sell the business in order to pay the estate tax. But in general, you say, well, where do people get the money to pay the estate tax? Well, they have to sell their bonds or stocks. And so here's what's happening is that these bonds and stocks, they are high-powered dollars. They are producing things. And when the government gets hold of it, it gets into consumption. And so the society is made worse off because it's taking high-powered dollars out of that position of producing things on the stock market and bonds and whatever, and putting it into food stamps or other kinds of government spending. And so I think the estate tax is one of the most vicious taxes. And then on top of it, in the United States, it does not generate that much revenue. I think something like the last time I looked, it was around 60 or 70 billion dollars. And then on top of it, it leads to a perverse economic behavior. That is, when people are not stupid, and so when they get older and older, they start giving their money away. They start they don't save as much because they know that the government's going to get their hands on it, or they will start giving money to their children, indulging their children in fancy cars or airplanes and all that kind of stuff, because they know, well, if I wait and die and give it to my children in terms of cash, the government's going to get their hands on it.
Mm-hmm. I hear one of this concept of spending too much. Someone said to me recently, he said, Doug, if you have a client and you're doing a financial plan for him, and it turns out that he's not going to make it, meaning he won't have enough money for the rest of his life, do you tell him that he should cut his spending, or that he should go get more money? And I said, well, it's hard to get more money, so I usually tell him he's got to watch his budget. And they said, so why doesn't the government work the same way? They keep feeling that they can continuously tax people more and more instead of cutting the spending dramatically. Is it different for people and governments, or do you think that makes sense?
Well, look, if I'm running up against the wall and I'm having difficulty meeting my bills, and I'm spending more than I'm taking in, well, if I can walk up to somebody with a gun in the hand and take their money, which is in effect what government has, a gun in the hand or some kind of coercion, well, why should I curtail spending? And then also, I have a wonderful thing that the government has a wonderful thing you and I do not have, and that is they can always print money to pay their bills. And if we do that to pay our bills, they frown on it and want to put us in jail. Matter of fact, I've often suggested to people that if you're on trial for counterfeiting, just tell the judge you were engaging in monetary policy.
All right. We have been talking to Professor Walter Williams from George Mason University. He's recently come out with a new book called Race and Economics, How Much Can Be Blamed on Discrimination. He was on the Goldstein on Gelt show previously, so if you missed that, please be sure to download it at the radio shows tab of www.profile-financial.com. Professor Williams, we're just about out of time, but maybe you could tell people how they could keep track of what you're doing.
Oh, yes, they can go to my webpage. I have a very healthy webpage. It's walterewilliams.com. Let me repeat that, walterewilliams.com. And if they mess up with the URL, they can just do a Google Walter E. Williams, and you'll come up with a lot of references.
Great. Professor Williams, thanks again.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt show.